So before I say anything about the game, I should probably apologise. Unless I can think of anything better, the thumbnail for this video probably says something like, "You've never played this game," and the title is something like Gregory Horror Show, the best game you've never played. And although it's fair to say that's true for a few of you, I know a lot of you have at least heard of it. But as much as I hate clickbait, the YouTube algorithm loves it, and I have put so much work into this video. So to give it a chance of being seen, I am selling my soul to the SEO devil. And while you're here, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, that'd be great.
Let's begin.
Gregory Horror Show is one of my favourite PlayStation 2 games. I think I first played it around 2008 after borrowing it from a friend on a gaming forum and instantly fell in love with how charming and bizarre it is. It's a quirky little survival horror game by Capcom Production Studio 3, best known for the early Resident Evil titles and that Dino Crisis game everyone hates. It's directed by Iro Shirahama, whose previous directorial work included Dino Stalker and Resident Evil Dead Aim, and who went on to direct both The Legend of Korra and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games for Platinum Games, which isn't a great resume to be honest. But the main game designer credit goes to Shino Okamura, who later went on to work as a planner for Monster Hunter 3 and 4 Ultimate, and as a game designer for Monster Hunter World and its expansion Iceborne, which is a far more impressive portfolio and probably explains how this game didn't turn out to be a complete mess. It was released in August 2003 in Japan and December 2003 in Europe, with weirdly no release in the United States. But I think the most surprising thing about Gregory Horror Show is the fact it's a licensed game. Gregory Horror Show was a CGI anime in Japan which aired between 1999 and 2003. It consisted of 88 episodes split over 3 main seasons with a 4th half season and 3 specials. The episodes are only a couple of minutes long each, so it only takes about an hour to get through a season, and I have done this many times in the years since first playing the game. So I can say with first-hand experience just how well Studio 3 have adapted the source material. This was likely helped by the fact that show creator Naomi Iwata was the writer for the game, giving it an air of legitimacy. Other than that, very little is known about the development of Gregory Horror Show, so without further ado, let's get to the game. Also, spoilers for a 20-year-old game that people try and sell for £100 or more on eBay. I paid £2.50 for mine. The game begins with disembodied voices speaking in unison, questioning how they got lost in a forest and how they came to find the hotel. We meet Gregory, an anthropomorphic rat, and the hotel's caretaker, who offers us a room. We enter our name and choose if we're male or female, and Gregory shows us to our room. I absolutely love the look and design of the game's cutscenes. They're lifted straight from the anime, but re-edited and given new voiceovers to give them new context. For the most part, it works well, and you'd be forgiven for not knowing they were repurposed scenes. But there are occasions when it doesn't feel quite right, but I'll point them out as they pop up. Either way, despite how cartoony and cute everything looks, it still manages to be creepy as hell, and I love that. So we enter our room and fall asleep, but now there's only one voice talking. The dual voices at the beginning were male and female, so when we chose our gender when we signed into the hotel, we were also choosing which voice would represent us for the rest of the game. It's a nice touch that adds a little inclusivity, as well as being a direct reference to the anime, which has a male narrator for Season 1 and a female narrator for Season 2. It's hard to say for certain if it's the same actors' voices in the game and the anime, since the anime just lists names and not roles, but Dave Petit and Anelia Gilbertson, using the stage name Chris Rundle, are credited as the narrator in the game. And seeing as they have very prominent roles both here and in the TV show as Gregory and Echo Zombie respectively, I think it's safe to assume they voiced the narrator in the show too. While sleeping, we dream and meet Death. He explains the hotel is full of lost souls, and if we find them and return them to him, he'll show us how to get back to the realm of the living. He lends us a body to use for our quest, and now I'm thinking about it, that's pretty morbid for a couple of reasons. First off, it means up until this point we've just been a floating soul ourselves, so we're not so much lost as we are dead. And 2, the body he's lent us is described as a little small and resembles a kid, which means Death just happened to have the body of a dead child lying around. So yeah, this game gets real dark. We awaken to the sound of an ear-splitting shriek coming from the room next door and go to investigate. Here we're told about two of the game's main mechanics, peeking and knocking. Pressing triangle when facing a door allows us to make like Lloyd Grossman and look through the keyhole into the room. If there's a guest inside, we can listen in as they talk to themselves, often revealing their own weaknesses or hinting at the weaknesses of other guests, which we'll need to exploit in order to obtain their souls. Pressing square when facing a door will make us knock on it. If there's a guest in the room, knocking on the door will cause them to come out and investigate, which is an important mechanic for soul collection, but also great if you just want to wind up the guests by playing Knock Door Run. You can also press square on other objects to hit them, which can sometimes get you an item, so in Gregory Horror Show it pays to act like a delinquent and just punch everything. Peeking into the room next door gets us our first objective. Get the key that's on the counter in the lobby and unlock the door. So we go to the lobby and ask Gregory for the key, but he's old, so he gets confused and thinks we asked for exposition, so gives us the backstory of the guest in the locked room instead. After being denied the key, Gregory declares it's 12:30 and about time he did his rounds of the hotel. And here, we're told about the guests' daily routines. Simply put, each guest has their own routine and their own schedule, and by spying on the residents of Gregory House, we can work out these schedules which will help us in our soul heist. So we casually hang around while Gregory begins his patrol, and fail miserably to not look suspicious while we wait for him to leave the lobby, and when he's gone, we're free to grab the key. Another quick tutorial pops up and we're told about key items, which, when equipped, can be used by pressing X. In talking to a guest with one equipped, we'll show it to them with varying effects. Back to the creepy zombie cat and we unlock the door and enter the room. We are now formally introduced to Neko Zombie, who acts as our sort of guide and exposition enthusiast. He tells us the guests are planning on keeping us here for all eternity and won't give up their souls that easily. We then get a practical tutorial on how peeking works as Neko Zombie tells us to spy on him and work out his weak point from the clues he gives us. When spying on a guest, they usually have around 3 or so speech bubbles, with the final important one being accompanied by a loud tone. It's a good audio indicator that you've heard all you need to hear and can move on. We go back to Neko Zombie and give him the correct answer, and as a reward, he gives us the soul he's carrying. He tells us there are 12 souls in total, and each guest in the hotel is carrying one before giving us the opportunity to ask him questions. When we've had all the explanations we can handle, we head back to our room to fall asleep and deliver the first soul to death. And if you're wondering why Death has a Swedish flag on his hat, it's apparently a reference to the 1957 Swedish film by Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal, where a knight, played by Max von Sydow, plays a game of chess against Death to get his life back, and was brilliantly parodied in 1991's Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And the Seventh Seal reference actually works better here than it does in the anime, because here we are literally playing a game with the objective of getting our life back. We hand over the soul, Death stamps our card, and it's back to Gregory House to get the other 11. We awake to find a note from Neko Zombie, so go to see him, and here we're introduced to Catherine, the weirdly sexed up pink lizard who loves taking blood with a giant syringe.
Oh, good.
Unfortunately for us, she was eavesdropping at the door and heard about our mission to steal everyone's soul. Neko Zombie gives us more hints and tips, including another tutorial on peeking, bringing that to 3 now. But he also tells us that guests react to sounds, such as doors opening and floorboards creaking, things that can give away our position when spying or hiding. He explains that the blue flame hovering around the guests are stolen souls, so it's easy to tell at a glance which guests are carrying one so we can target them for liberation. And we're told about knocking again. Once we finish talking and leave, we're introduced to James, who drops a banana peel on the floor, and it's here I noticed a cute detail. The voiceover for Gregory says the word garbage, but the text in his speech bubble says rubbish.
James, you nasty child! Stop throwing your garbage on the floor!
Both words mean the same thing, but the voiceover is the American term and the text is the English term. I don't really have a point here, I just thought it was a fun observation, but it's likely due to the game only being released in Asia and Europe. Gregory berates James and asks, what if someone steps on it and has an accident? So it's a not so subtle hint about how to steal Catherine's soul, but it's also a great bit of design. A lot of games would have outright explained, you could try dropping the banana peel in front of her to make her fall over, but by having you be a passive observer of a situation that essentially tells you the same thing, it makes you feel smart for going, oh, I bet I can make Catherine slip on a banana peel, and also gives an active example of how hints and tips are given in this game. So Catherine sees us and legs it, and we decide to peek in on Neko Zombie for a hint and hear him speak about dinner plates loaded with food in the kitchen, so it's off to find that place. We bump into James again, who lets slip that we're a sacrifice, and I can't stress enough how much I hate this little guy. He's an annoying little shit who follows you as soon as he sees you, giving away your position and making your soul robbery so much more difficult. As we walk through the door, we emerge and it is chaos. But talking to Gregory gets us a map of the ground floor of the hotel. Talking to him again, he tells us Catherine recently slipped on a banana peel and to be careful not to slip in case we drop something important, which kind of moots my earlier point about the game not outright telling you the solutions, so thanks for that, Greg. A quick look at the map then, and I love this thing. In addition to giving us area locations, it shows us the direction our little guy is facing and the positions of the guests in the hotel. Making a beeline for the kitchen then, and we're stuck with James following us, and I really do hate this guy. We find a banana peel in the bin and are told key items on your person can be cycled through with R1. Back to the foyer, and it's time to put our plan into action. Checking the map shows you the position of the guests, but their icons don't move in real time. So you have to close the map, wait a moment, and open it again to see if they've moved position. Once I think I've worked out Catherine's route, I drop the banana peel and run away until Catherine is down and the soul is ready for collection. Another detail I like is the music change here, indicating a soul is unguarded and ready for the taking. It happens every time one becomes available, and I'm a big fan because I just really like audio cues for some reason. So we go off to find Catherine and collect our prize before being teleported back to Neko Zombie for another explanation. This time it's horror shows, the titular mechanic of the game. When you've stolen a soul from a guest and that guest spots you, they will chase you. If they catch you, they will force you to take part in a horror show, and some of them can be quite deadly.
Hey, are you feeling sick? Okay then, take this medicine. Okay! I win! Yay!
Neko Zombie tells us to just run away, but that's easier said than done considering guests chasing you actually run quicker than you do, and as the game goes on and more souls are taken, more guests are out for your blood, which can make escaping a nightmare and cause some game-ending accidents, which you'll see later. At this point, we're introduced to the mental gauge, which is essentially this game's version of a health bar. The mental gauge is constantly going down by itself, and if we're trapped in a horror show, it depletes a lot. Once the gauge reaches 0, we're trapped in the hotel forever, and it's game over. The mental gauge is replenished by sleeping, reading the various books we'll find around the hotel, or using some familiar looking items, but more on that later. Keeping hold of a soul you found makes your mind stronger, increasing your defense and slowing down deterioration, and the more souls you carry at one time, the stronger your mind. But if you're caught in a horror show while carrying a soul, that soul will be taken from you and you'll have to go through the process of stealing it back all over again. It's a risk-reward system that honestly offers way more risk than reward, as you'll soon see. Neko Zombie tells us we're going after Judgment Boy's soul next. Judgment Boy is introduced like this.
Do you know my name? Judgment!
And honestly, this is the one character I feel has been badly adapted from the anime to the game, and I'll explain why soon, but first it's back to our room to sleep and deliver soul number 2. After getting our card stamped, we see a little scene of Gregory talking to himself about receiving the new guests and opening the doors to the rooms on the bottom floor. If you haven't put it together by now, the first night is just this game's training level, and this soul is essentially the final test to make sure we fully understand the game's mechanics before the horrors of Gregory House are fully opened up to us. Waking up then, we're refreshed and full of hope. Our mental gauge is full, and we are ready to steal a soul. A quick look around our room, and it's revealed the bookshelf is an item box. It can hold 50 items and 50 books, which is handy because our guy can only carry 8 items at once, and those slots fill up fast. As soon as we step out of the room, we're jumped by Judgment Boy. He tells us if we ever want his help, we're to bring a symbol of our problem to him, and he'll give us a special judgment. But what could this item be? First port of call, as always, is Neko Zombie, and we find out Gregory has lost a book. Next, we have a cheeky peek in Catherine's room, and after checking the map to see where she is, let ourselves in and ransack the place, finding a dirty book titled Erotic Night. Next, to the library, and what do we find on the floor outside? A cheeky reference to Resident Evil. Into the library for another green herb and a load of books that will come in handy later. Then out again to spy on James and see if he has any useful intel. He mentions something about Gregory's book, but before we get anything useful, he realises it's 10 o'clock and goes to watch TV. Things like this happen a lot. The residents of the hotel are on their own schedules, and if you're too late spying in them, you have to wait until the correct time the next day to try again. Quick trip back into the library to grab another book, and in walks Gregory, who tells us not to take notes on the other guests' behaviour. But he's a creepy pervert, so we're not going to listen to him. Instead, we go back to our room to drop off the herbs and books we've stolen. I store the items, no problem, but for some reason it won't let me store the books I'm carrying, so it looks like they're going to be stuck in my inventory for a while. If only the game would give me a clue. Checking the desk reveals a memo, which automatically fills up with information on the guests' routines when you find it, making it easier to keep track of their schedules. Time to spy on Catherine, so it's off to the diner, and it's a close call, so we duck into this door for a moment and find a shop, which we don't need yet, but will certainly come in handy later. Checking the map shows us Catherine went back into the dining room, so it's back to that door to be a peeping Tom. She says she found James snooping in her room, so gave him a spanking.
Oh my.
And that he was carrying a book. So we can deduce that the book Gregory has lost is a dirty book, which was stolen by James and left in Catherine's room. We ransack the manager's office, reading James's diary as we go, and go on the rob in the nurse's office before spying on James in the TV room as he watches a Super Sentai-style TV show, but he doesn't really tell us anything useful. At this point, I'm carrying too many items and my mental gauge is 3/4 depleted, so it's time to head back to the room. We drop off the items in the storage, and I figure out how to switch to the bookshelf and can finally drop off all the books we've been carrying. I've been up for 4 hours and get around half the mental gauge replenished. Then rush off to spy on Judgment Boy, who might give us a clue as to what the item is that we need to give him. He does not. A quick stop to see Neko Zombie, who is horrified at the porno mag we're carrying with us. And that's the gameplay loop of Gregory Horror Show. You run around collecting items, dropping them back in your room, and spying on guests until you can figure out how to snatch someone's soul. Rinse and repeat. And somehow it remains mostly fun. I'd be lying if I said it didn't get tedious at times, but that, for me at least, comes from the frustration of not being able to figure out a relatively simple puzzle, such as which item Judgment Boy wants me to give him. Anyway, now we're looking for Gregory, but decide to have a little spy on Catherine to see if she can be helpful and almost get caught again. So we duck into the TV room and get told by Gregory to go back to our room because we look like shit. And to be fair, I didn't realise how far depleted the mental gauge was. But first we'll talk to him while holding the dirty magazine. We hand it over and he suggests we go look for a different book in the ground floor library. This is another instance where the text uses the English term and the voiceover uses the American term, and I still find it cute. Gregory runs off, so we ransack the TV room for useful items and see the pervy old rat disappear into the storeroom for a wank, so decide to spy on him. The mental gauge is almost empty though, so it's time to get back to bed as quickly as possible. This time we only get a 2-hour nap, so it's time to read a book. And that is so much better. But do you see how our little guy's eyes have changed colour? This is because we're now inflicted with darkness, one of many status ailments in Gregory Horror Show. This happens between 12 AM and 6 AM, but also when we're exploring underground and makes things in the distance a lot harder to see. We can use eye drops to recover from it, but it's not really necessary, as this is the one ailment that doesn't get worse if it's not cured. But more on those later. We go the long way round to the library and check in on Judgment Boy again, who's complaining to himself that no one is coming to see him, likely because they're reading a certain book found in the library. So it looks like the item we seek is definitely in there, so we head straight there and find the self-help book key item. We go back to Judgment Boy, who notices the self-help book and gives us a special judgment, and it's... He tells us the premise of the game and asks what we'll do, but I was sat there impatiently pressing the X button and chose the wrong answer by mistake. Luckily there was no penalty, so we just have to talk to him again and choose the right answer. Now, I mentioned earlier I don't like how Judgment Boy is depicted in the game. The first issue I have with him is the theme song he sings about himself. For some reason, it's been changed from the one he sings in the anime, which, in my opinion, sounds way better.
Do you know who I am? They call me Judgment Boy. Do you know who I am? They call me Judgment Boy. Do you know who I am? They call me Judgment Boy.
It's more haunting and sinister as it travels down the corridor towards your ears, unlike the game version, which is... Judgment! Yeah. My next issue is the whole money or love choice we have to make. In the anime, the scenario he gives the protagonist is a businessman is about to sign a major contract, but his girlfriend has been hit by a car and goes to the hospital. If he goes to the hospital, he'll lose the contract. Which do you choose? Money or love? But in the game, we have to choose between escaping or not escaping. Neither of those choices has anything to do with money or love, so contextually the choice makes no sense. It's just fan service for fan service's sake, and it feels off to me. They changed up his voice actor too, and I genuinely think Steve Olsen does a much better job in the show.
You chose the contract, and in the meantime, your girlfriend dies alone in her hospital bed. It was your choice. You get to live with it.
Again, it's more sinister and less of whatever this is.
No matter how tough things got, you never gave up.
Anyway, we get the soul and head to bed and... It's time to run! Eventually, she falls over and I make my getaway, making it to bed to deliver the third soul to the Reaper. From now on, giving a soul to death will restore the mental gauge and heal any status ailments, which comes in very useful as the game progresses, and he stamps our card for the final time that night. I'm kind of in two minds about this first night. On the one hand, it does an excellent job of explaining the mechanics and gameplay, but on the other, it is very handholdy, and the fact it explains the same mechanics multiple times is baffling. I think the most egregious example of this is the first time you spy through Neko Zombie's door, only to then have the mechanics of what we've just done explained to us a couple of minutes later and told to do it again. But as a training level, it does its job well, and it more than sets you up for what's to come. As the second night begins, we eavesdrop on Catherine and Gregory plotting against us, and the pair mention Gregory's mother, whom they both appear to be afraid of. We're then introduced to the new guests, Lost Doll, Mummy Dog and Mummy Papa, and Cactus Gunman and Cactus Girl. Checking the map after waking up reveals 3 blue dots. These are the locations of the new guests, and I like the fact the game doesn't reveal who they are until we run into them for the first time. Spying on Neko Zombie reveals the guest Lost Doll is on the first floor, which is a natural way of telling us we can explore upstairs. But before I do anything else, I'm going to save the game, which for some reason I haven't done until now. I am not clever. The new residents are over on the right side of the hotel, so that's where we're headed. Peeking into the nurse's office reveals Catherine speaking to Cactus Gunman. They don't have useful information, but they do mention how awesome I am, which is nice. And then we go on peeking on Mummy Dog and Mummy Papa, who talk about headaches. Knocking on the door makes them come out, and talking to them reveals that holding a soul makes them feel better. And then they run off. We make a quick stop at the storeroom to steal Gregory's porn magazine in case he needs distracting later, and spying on James in the library reveals the lost doll has lost her doll, and maybe it's like the one they have on sale in the shop. As much as I hate how annoying James is, he always comes in clutch with his clues, and I honestly appreciate that. But the mental gauge is depleting rapidly, so it's time for a story, and I take a few items from storage because we're about to need them. You see, the shop in Gregory Horror Show works on a trading system. Each item has a star value between 1 and 5, and to get an item from the shop, we need to trade our own items against it for equal or greater value. In this instance, the doll we need is worth 5 stars, so we trade in 5 stars worth of our items and claim our prize. I really like this system for some reason. The devs could easily have added money as an item to find while exploring, or allowed us to sell the items we found for cash. But having a trading system, it simplifies things a bit, and kind of feels more realistic in a weird way. Like, this is a hotel full of ghosts and ghouls. Why would they have money? Anyway, we equip the doll and head upstairs. And this is where, for want of a better term, the night goes to shit. I drop the toy next to the lost doll, but she doesn't react, so I pick it up, thinking maybe I can talk to her while having it equipped, like I did with Greg and his spank mag, and that action triggers a horror show. She still has her soul, so I was not expecting this at all, but apparently certain guests will perform a horror show before their soul is taken. What a lovely way to find this out. Luckily, our guy survives and I duck into the first room I see to get safe, but things aren't looking great. We're now inflicted with nervousness, which makes recovery items half as effective. It can be cured with an antacid, which I don't have at the moment, and I don't want to use the items I have because in my mind, I can steal this soul and hand it to death, curing any status ailments. Also, I'm an idiot. It turns out this is Cactus Gunman's room, so I make a break for it and immediately run into Cactus Girl for another horror show I wasn't expecting, losing another quarter of the mental gauge and getting a herb stolen. The game has just changed its own rules, and I don't appreciate it. I seriously need to get back to the room now, so downstairs we go, where we run into Mummy Popper, who thankfully legs it. I head in the direction of the room, and bloody Cactus Girl appears again, so now I have to go the long way round, so I check the map to make sure the coast is clear. Catherine is in the TV room, but none of the other guests on the way to the room will perform a horror show if they see me, so if I keep running, I'll be okay. The chase is on, and as I turn the corner,
hello darkness, my old friend.
And that's it, isn't it? 1 minute you're a sneaky little soul thief, the next you're caught in a chain of horror shows. And just like that, it's game over. And it's my own stupid fault, so I can't even be mad. Reloading then, we head back to the storeroom to recollect the perv book and peek in a few doors in case we can get some new clues. We head back to the first floor and ransack some of the unoccupied rooms as we go, finding this floor's map. We need to go and buy the doll again, but this is the point of the night when the least amount of guests are going to be trying to kill us, so it's probably the best time to go on an item and information collecting spree. And it's in doing this that I stumble across possibly the luckiest find I'll ever get in Gregory House. Taking a look inside the mummy's room, and what do we see? Their soul on the bedside table, unguarded, while they both sleep. This is too good an opportunity to pass up, so we creep into the room and claim it for ourselves. Unfortunately, our guy comes down with a case of tiredness, which is indicated by the icon's red eyes. Tiredness isn't a problem on its own, but if left untreated can cause us to get a headache, which leads to all sorts of issues. Luckily it's cured by sleeping, and now that we have a soul it's time to go to bed anyway, so it's all worked out. Or has it? Because it's at this point of the game that my brain stopped working. I decide to keep hold of the soul, seeing as it grants a defense boost, and it'd be cool to hand in multiple souls at once. So I run to the lost doll, and I have no idea why. I don't have the doll to give her, and I know I can't talk to her without getting a horror show, but I try it anyway, and now I'm inflicted with nervousness again. I genuinely have no idea why I did that. So it's back to the room to drop off items and have a sleep, and although handing the soul over would cure the nervousness, I decide not to do that. Instead I wake up, grab some items for trading, and head to the shop. Swap a couple of bits for an antacid to cure the nervousness, and the rest of the items to buy the doll. I head back to the mental mannequin and drop the new toy in front of her, and this time she takes the bait, moving out of the way of the door, leaving us free to steal her soul and ransack her room. So now we have 2 souls. But instead of returning to the room and handing them over to death like a normal person, I decided it would be far cooler to get Cactus Gunman's soul too, and at this point in the video, you're probably thinking, what the hell are you doing, man? And I honestly don't know. I'm watching this footage back for the edit, and I am so confused about my actions. We go to spy on the cactus, and he says something about, once isn't enough, but 3 times is. Knock on the door, duck into a room, and see what he says. He lets slip that it takes more than 1 knock to scare him, so if I had to guess, I'd say it takes 3. So I step outside and get immediately chased by Lost Doll and apparently forget how stairs work, so she traps us in another horror show. Only this time, she steals one of the souls that I chose not to give to death because I'm good at this game and know what I'm doing. We come to, and not only have we lost a soul, we're also inflicted with melancholy, which happens whenever a guest steals a soul back from you, and it sucks because now we're too depressed to run, so we're forced to plod along at half speed. Just like real life, melancholy is cured by eating laughing shrooms, which we don't have, so all I can do is drag our nervous and depressed ass back to the room and hope we don't bump into anyone out for our blood, because there is no way we're escaping if that happens. And somehow we make it back, so it's straight to bed to hand over the 1 soul we have left, get our card stamped and cure our ailments. Wide awake now, and it's straight to the shop to trade items for the doll again, beeline to the effing effigy, drop the bait, steal the soul and savour the frog, because apparently I'm not done being stupid. But I mean, come on, the cactus is right there. So we knock 3 times and he gets scared and legs it, dropping his soul behind him. We collect it and oh, come on! I almost get away, but almost isn't good enough, is it? This one stings because I was so close to the room. Luckily, I saved before messing with the cactus because I cannot be bothered to buy that doll for a third time. Now, some people would call this save scumming, but I call it an efficient use of my time. Not that it matters because I fail again, so make another attempt. And the rampaging ragdoll just won't go away, and Cactus Gunman comes back and retakes his soul. So we go back to the room and kill some time with a good book, head back to the first floor, and she's gone! Finally! Leaving us to wind up the cactus for the last time. This time we get the soul and manage to get back to the room without incident. I do what I do every night and go to bed and dream of death, hand the souls over, get our card stamped, and end the second night. As much as I am not good, the second night is great. It's just tricky enough not to be a breeze, and due to how close Cactus Gunman and Lost Dolls rooms are, it forces you to do things at different times of the day for better results. But I am going to complain about one thing: the way the player character controls. This isn't exclusive to the second night, but it's an issue that started to cause me problems as the hotel began to fill with guests. Our guy controls with 3D movement. Up is up, left is left, right is right, down is down. You know, how the majority of 3D games control. And that's fine, our guy actually feels great to control. The problem appears when you go through a door, but keep holding the direction you were heading when you entered. When you're loading in on the other side, your character whips around in the direction you're pushing. This also happens if there are any sharp camera changes while running. Usually it doesn't cause a problem, it's just a minor inconvenience. But when running away from guests, it can be a real pain and be the difference between escaping and getting caught. There is the option to switch to tank controls, meaning left and right rotate you on the spot, up moves you forward in the direction you're facing, and back makes you step backwards in the opposite direction, like Resident Evil. But Gregory Horror Show doesn't use fixed camera angles like that game. Instead, the camera can be rotated with the right analog stick, but the camera controls it inverted, which is already a nightmare, so combining tank controls with an inverted camera and fighting against switch camera angles when they do change is like controlling the thing with a bop it. But that's all I can think to complain about really. Other than that, it's solid. On to night 3. As the third night begins, the save room frog warns Gregory of a future consumed by fire, which he waves off as a load of baloney before being warned that he cannot escape his fate. Next, we see Judgment Boy, who tells Gregory his mother is looking for him and asks if his conscience is clear. Gregory says yes, but Judgment Boy's judgment says otherwise, and we learn that it was in fact his fault that his mother's souls were stolen. And we get our first look at the hotel's terrifying matriarch. Gregory then unlocks a door in the yard and we are introduced to the new guests, TV Fish, Roulette Boy, and my personal favourite, Hell Chef. Checking the map shows us James is in the library, so we head straight to him to find him mumbling to himself about leaving a door open, but nothing useful. So we head to the kitchen to see who the new guest occupying that space is. It's Hell Chef, talking to himself about boiling a fish and wanting to go down to the second floor of the basement. He doesn't say anything else useful, so we enter the kitchen and he runs away, leaving us to raid the fridge. Leaving the kitchen, we run into Catherine, so run back the way we came until she settles down. We go the long way round to the dining room to spy on her now she's seated, and we get our first clue for the night as she mentions that she saw TV Fish on the bottom floor around 6 PM. Since we're close, we go to the shop to see if there's anything useful, and notice the batteries are finally in stock, so we trade a bunch of crap for them, drop off unneeded items in the box, and have a read. Spying on Echo Zombie tells us TV Fish appears just before noon in the second floor basement, so we head to the yard and enter the newly unlocked door and descend the stairs into the depths below. The basement is the largest area of the game, consisting of 3 floors, and whenever we enter we're inflicted with darkness, so everything is much harder to see. Luckily we find the map to the first floor basement, and next to that some eye drops, and by the looks of it more will appear later, which is very useful. Looking at the map there are some stairs to the south, so we head there, and find ourselves on the other side of the locked door near the nurse's office, so unlock it to create a shortcut. Back into the basement, we find an area that looks like a reception room, and peeking through the door reveals a life-size board game that will definitely be important later. Checking the map again, there are some more stairs on the west side of the basement, so we head there. We find Roulette Boy's room on the way and help ourselves to his possessions, and we find what appears to be a grow room full of herbs and laughing shrooms, so fill our pockets with Gregory's supply. Heading back to the room to store the items we don't need, we run into Catherine, who chases us back the way we came. One of the downsides of opening that shortcut, it seems, is now the guests have more ways to enter the basement, which is going to make our lives a little bit more difficult. From the yard, we go back to the room, read a book, and empty our pockets. And as we leave, we immediately run into Catherine, which genuinely scared the hell out of me. We hide until she goes, but before any progress can be made, we come down with a case of tiredness and have to sleep it off. Back to the basement, and the map shows Roulette Boy and a blue dot, which turns out to be TV Fish. It gets scared and runs away, so all we can do for now is steal the rest of Gregory's weed. We check one more room and find a dead remote key item, but our inventory's full again, so it's time to go back and drop off our spoils and put the batteries we bought earlier into the dead remote. And thinking about it now, having a single item box to store our belongings is kind of bad level design. As the hotel expands, it would have made sense to give the player another storage box and link it to our room in the same way the item boxes in Resident Evil are linked. You could argue that that would make the game less difficult, as in order to trek back to your room, you have to avoid all the guests on the way. And yeah, maybe, but it isn't as if Gregory Horror Show is a particularly difficult game anyway, and it would certainly make it less annoying. Spying on Catherine gets us more info on TV Fish, and we peek in at an excited Neko zombie who's saying something about Gregory being called up. We head back to the basement and it appears we're in luck. TV Fish is right where we left it, and I can't see the remote control being used on any other guests, so let's see what it does. Chasing it down then, we zap it with the remote, which knocks it out, leaving it sold for the taking. And as we grab that, we stumble across an ominous looking lever and pull it, which looks like it opens the way to the next floor of the basement. Here we find a speed up, an item which makes us run fast, which will come in very handy later. And like the eye drops on the floor above, more of these will appear later on. Next we find the map of this floor and head toward the dead end in the middle, as, let's be honest, there's probably something there. And there is! A switch, to be exact, opening the way to the next floor of the basement. Heading to the east side of the map, you find another locked roulette room, and with nowhere else to go, we jump down this hole to the third floor basement. We find a dice key item and another locked roulette room, shortly followed by another switch, and thankfully find some eye drops so we can see, which makes finding the map for the third floor basement a lot easier. We find another hole, jump in, and appear at the garbage chute in the yard. I'm not going to try and question the logic behind the physics of this, so let's just call them ghost physics and move on. Being in the yard, we're close to the room, so it's a quick stop there to drop off more items. And learning from my mistakes on the second night, I go to sleep and deliver the soul to Death, who stamps our card. Now is a perfect time to save, so we do that, and since we have the dice key item, it's time to track down Roulette Boy. But first we have to run away from Catherine again. We go through the foyer to get to the shortcut into the basement, and Gregory is talking to Hell's Chef, who quickly runs away. And since we're here, we might as well get some intel. Angry Candle mentions someone has been putting stuff in his soup pot, and if he catches anyone doing it again, he'll hunt them down and chop them in half. And that knob Gregory tries to pin the crime on me, which I do not appreciate. As I'm about to leave, I notice Catherine is about to waddle past to take the opportunity to spy on her as well. She mentioned something about an area having a draft and that Hell's Chef can't move if he has his flame blown out. Before going to the basement, I look through a couple more keyholes and notice the storeroom has a draft. This game is really pushing for me to go after Hell's Chef this time, but Roulette Boy is right here, so I equip the dice and talk to him, and he whisks us off to one of his board game rooms along with Gregory to play Hell's Roulette. The rules are simply spin the roulette wheel and get to the goal before your opponent. You can view the board and work out the safest and most beneficial spaces to land on. Each space on the board has a different effect on it, like Bomb, which explodes when you land on it, taking away some of your health. Move, which lets you spin again. Safe recovers some of your mental gauge. Counter readies a 10-ton weight above your head, which will drop on you unless passed on to your opponent, and when it eventually drops on someone, that player misses their next turn. Event squares activate an ability, such as invisibility, and return, which is meant to return you to the beginning of the board, but for some reason doesn't affect Gregory here, but it does affect me, which is some bullshit. Passing through the item checkpoint gives you an item, and you can hold up to 3 at a time. Items can be used before you spin the wheel to heal and help yourself, or hinder your opponent. Not that it matters, because I mess up again and get returned to the start, leaving Gregory to win with the longest possible lead. I might as well have not played. Losing doesn't really have any consequences though, it just drops you into the reception of one of the basement roulette rooms, so all I have to do is find Roulette Boy again and retry. But that's easier said than done, as I'm instantly seen by Catherine and Mummy Papa, who chase me back to the basement. I manage to get away and exit via the courtyard when I'm immediately seen and chased by Mummy Dog. This family hates me, and to be honest, I don't blame them. Thankfully, we escape to our room and have a replenishing read before going back on the hunt for Roulette Boy, who appears to be in one of his game rooms. And if you're wondering why I didn't save just now, me too. Back to the basement, and Roulette Boy is behind a locked door, so we give it a little knock, and out comes Mummy Dog. Escaping back into the hotel, I almost run into Catherine, and my heart can't take this. Earlier this year, I was diagnosed with hypertension and have been taking blood pressure medication ever since, and to be honest, I'm beginning to think this game is the cause of that. I managed to escape my puppy pursuer and make my first smart decision in a while and save. Checking the map shows everyone is either in their rooms or on the other side of the hotel, so the coast is clear for us to make a mad dash back to the basement. Unfortunately, we run into James, so I guess he's here now too. The map shows Roulette Boy and Mummy Dog are still together, so getting to Roulette Boy is going to be tricky. But with a little bit of skill and a lot of luck, we do it and get to try the hellish game of roulette once again. But this time I came prepared. I noticed something last time on the spins, but this starting spin just confirmed it. The pointer will settle 4 spaces ahead of where you press stop, so pressing on 3 will stop on 7, 4 on 8, etc. Or at a glance, pressing X on yellow will stop on yellow. In theory, this makes the game easy to manipulate. All you need to do is look at the board, work out the best place to land, and then make the spinner stop on the number you need. However, there is room for error, and pressing exactly when you need it to isn't an exact science, as you can't accurately determine where exactly on the targeted number you're pressing stop due to how the pointer looks when it's moving. So pressing X too early or too late can and does happen, but once you get a feel for the thing, it becomes very easy to get the pointer to stop where you need it to. As is evident on this try, as I absolutely destroy Gregory with such tactics as turning every space into bombs to blow him up, and dropping a weight on his stupid rat head before blowing himself up and leaving me to win like a boss. Roulette Boy gives us his soul as reward and says he's opening the other roulette boards in the basement and that playing roulette from now on will get us a prize. The game also becomes accessible from the main menu to play against an AI Gregory or a friend if you have a second controller, which is a genuinely nice addition. From what I can tell, the different basement levels pertain to difficulty, with 1 being easy, 2 being normal, and 3 being hard. And the speed the roulette wheel spins on basement 3 is so fast it's almost impossible to use the exploit I mentioned earlier, so good luck if you're trying that. Hell's Roulette is a fantastic minigame that's both easy to understand and play, and it seems to have kicked off something of a trend in Capcom's games, specifically the Devil May Cry series, of having board game themed stages in them. And if you can think of any other Capcom games with challenge stages like this, please let me know in the comments. Winning kicks us back to the first floor basement, so it's time to do the smart thing and head back to the room to hand the soul to death. The hotel is pretty packed now, but we managed to get back to bed without bumping into anyone, hand over the second soul of the night, and get our card stamped. We only have Hell Chef to go, and we already know how to do it, so hopefully this one will be a breeze. And I just realised that's a pun, and you know what? I'm not even ashamed. I start the mission by filling my inventory with items to throw in the soup, and make my way to the kitchen through the yard, as that seems the safest. I notice Neko Zombie is in the kitchen, so peek through the keyhole and see him raiding the fridge. We join him, but get caught by Gregory, who drags Neko Zombie back to his room. But now we're alone in the kitchen, it's time to ruin the soup. I love how we get more and more nervous with each item that gets thrown in, and the soup gets worse and worse. It's a nice touch. But we quickly run out of items, so have to go and scavenge for more, and get caught by Catherine in the process. Luckily, the horror show shuffles the guest's location, so we can get back to the room, have a read, and stock up on more soup-destroying items. And after about 8 items, the soup becomes rotten, so it's time to wait near the storeroom for old Gordon Waxy. And it's safe to say he's not happy when he finds what we've done to his soup.
This is your doing, isn't it? Spoiled my cooking, will you? I'll get you for this. I'll make you into a stew!
We quickly dive into the storeroom, followed by Hell Chef, who promptly has his flame blown out and comes to a complete standstill. Gregory comes in and scolds us for teasing Chef, relighting his candle and taking him back to the kitchen, leaving his soul behind for us to collect. Honestly, that probably could have gone better, but we've got the soul, so I'm not complaining. We head straight to bed to see our old friend Death, hand over the soul and get our card stamped for the final time that night, and with that, we begin the 4th night. The 3rd night is a lot of fun. Having the 3 basement levels open up greatly expands the size of the hotel. I just wish there was more to it. Only a handful of guests wander down there, but they don't really do anything more than hang out in the corridor. I'd have liked to have seen more guests serve an actual purpose down there. For example, Roulette Boy and Mummy Dog spend a lot of time hanging out in the game room, and seeing how they are reminds me of when I went on holiday as a kid and made friends with the other kids who were there. I'd have liked to have seen more stuff like that, like Hell Chef spending time in the grow room looking after the plants and mushrooms because they're ingredients. There are more than enough rooms down there that could have been occupied, so I can't help but think content was cut for time, which is a shame. But now it's time for Nightfall. The night begins with Gregory Mama scolding Gregory for letting the guests get a hold of her souls before ordering him to get them back. It turns out she collects souls to stay young and beautiful, and Gregory walks off mumbling to himself about a new victim for his mother. And I've only just now noticed the similarities to Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The new guests are introduced, and tonight we get Clockmaster and my son, and Angel Dog. So we can only collect 2 souls, which is strange. We start the night by looking at the map and seeing a new guest is in with Neko Zombie, so we peek inside his cell and see Angel Dog talking to him. She mentions the boy who fixes the clock has a screwdriver that was a present from his father, and if it was ever stolen, his dad would lose his temper and use some kind of strange technique, and whenever he uses that technique, he breaks down. Next, we spy on Catherine while she sleeps, who reiterates that Clockmaster can't protect my son once he's broken down, and my son is the one of the 2 who carries the soul. That is a lot of information for 2 conversations, so it looks like we have to steal my son's screwdriver and make Clockmaster break down and steal the soul from my son. Should be easy. Quick save next, and there's a new guest in the storeroom, so it's time to go and look in there. It's my son, fixing the grandfather clock. He says he's worried about his dad, who uses a time-stopping technique when he loses his temper and breaks down, and if that happens, he'll be in big trouble. There's a new guest in the bar, which has to be Clockmaster, so we go and see if he's got anything useful to say, but he's drunk himself unconscious like the father of the year that he is. We head back downstairs and my son has finally left the storeroom, so it's time to go and steal his screwdriver. On the way out, we run into Hell's Chef, and in running away, I make a huge mistake and head upstairs instead of dashing into the storeroom, and in doing so, run into Lost Doll for another horror show, and now we're inflicted with nervousness. From the looks of it, both downstairs routes back to the room are blocked with guests who are out to get me, so I try to sneak past Catherine, but she gives chase. I almost make it back to the safety of the room and run straight into Hell's Chef for another horror show, and by this point my mental gauge was only like a 5th full, and with a swing of his giant knife, he ends the game. Time to reload and try again. Unfortunately, this takes us back to before we had the screwdriver, so now we have to wait for my son to leave the storeroom again so the great tool heist can begin. Again. And it's just my luck that while wandering around, I run into Cactus Gunman, who immediately gives chase. And he is fast, easily catching up and performing his horror show. But we're okay. We had enough mental gauge to survive, and the horror show rearranged the guests, so now the storeroom is empty and the screwdriver is free to steal. But we first have to go back to the room to read and replenish our mental gauge. As we're about to leave, we almost run into Hell's Chef, who lingers outside for a disturbing amount of time. Eventually he leaves, but we have another problem. The way to the storeroom is full of guests. Luckily they appear to be moving away, so I risk it. We plod past my son like we're not up to anything suspicious at all. But Mummy Dog sees us and we dive into the storeroom to collect the screwdriver. I figure if we have it and survive Mummy Dog's inevitable horror show, then it's still a win. But Mummy Dog doesn't follow us inside, which is insanely lucky because he is right outside the door. When it's safe, we leave the storeroom and now there are 3 speech bubbles hovering in front of Mummy Popper's door. So instead of returning to the safety of the room or saving the game like a smart person, I decide to take a peek and almost get caught by Hell's Chef again. There's nothing useful going on in here, just Angel Dog conspiring against us. But Clockmaster is sleeping in the room opposite, so it's time to see if we can make him break down. We steal a fruit of time off his bedside table, which skips time forward by 2 hours when eaten, and wake the talking timepiece up by showing him the screwdriver. I've always found the way he says my son's screwdriver to be weird.
Isn't that my son's screwdriver?
There's something about the intonation. It's quite musical, and for some reason it's stuck with me for years. I don't know if it's because it is being said in a weird way, or if it's just because I've heard him say it so many times in my life that it started to grate on me. He gives chase and he uses his secret technique that pauses time for a few seconds, allowing him to catch up. And now Hell Chef joins the chase, so it's back to the room for safety and arrest. Let's try that again. A quick check of the map to see if the coast is clear and... nope. Why is this guy always hanging around our room? It is genuinely unsettling. And now Catherine trudges past as the psycho candle moves up the hallway, but he keeps turning around to stare at our door like he really wants to get us. Eventually, he moves on enough for us to be able to get out of the room and head upstairs to find Clockmaster.
Isn't that my son, Screwdriver?
He gives chase again, but upstairs is clear, so we keep running without the danger of bumping into another guest. The third time he performs Time Stop, he breaks down, so I steal his golden stopwatch, which skips time ahead by 1 hour when used.
Now I'm the Time Master!
And now we head down to the basement to steal a child's soul, running into Mummy Dog and Roulette Boy in the process, giving Clockmaster time to wake up. I manage to lose Mummy Dog, but Mummy Popper gives chase now, and I narrowly escape him, only to be caught by Mummy Dog, who, after giving up on chasing me, headed back to his room, which just so happens to be in the direction I was headed. Now I'm nervous, have a headache, and I'm running low on mental gauge, so raid the nurse's office and find nothing in there. And as I head out, I almost run into Roulette Boy. Again. Luckily, I get back to the room in one piece and have a read to replenish the mental gauge. But now I'm tired too. I could go to the shop for headache medicine and have a sleep to cure the tiredness, but instead I decide to go after Clockmaster again, because if I can hand a soul over, all my ailments will be cured.
Isn't that my son, Screwdriver?
He gives chase and we jump down the trash chute and head to the basement, which is thankfully clear, and after 3 stops he breaks down again. My son is in the dining room, which is easy enough to get to, but he's with Roulette Boy. I decide to risk a snatch and grab, but as I enter the dining room, somehow Hell Chef is there too, and my plan goes about as well as expected. But we survive and manage to get back to the room and get to bed. This cures our tiredness, but we still have a headache, and now we're confused, which is what happens when you leave nervousness untreated for 15 minutes. Confusion is a bastard of an ailment because it inverts the controls, making forward, backward, and left, right. It's sealed with a sedative, which I don't have on me, so I stock up on items to trade and turn my controller upside down so I can walk to the shop without issues. I get sedatives for the confusion, headache medicine for the headache, and antacids for the nervousness, and now our guy is so hopped up on over-the-counter meds he doesn't feel a damn thing. I save the game, and thankfully Clockmaster is in the storeroom and it is a straight run there. We wake the drunken fool up once again, and once again he chases us to the basement and it doesn't take long before he breaks down. This time my son is in his room and we get there with no issue. My son sees his screwdriver and calls for his dad, who is currently a broken mess on the basement floor. He pleads for us to return his screwdriver and in return gives us his soul. So it's back to bed for us, another soul for death, and a new stamp on our card. Our final target for the night is Angel Dog, who just so happens to be in Neko Zombie's cell. Only that isn't Angel Dog, it's Devil Dog. And she's talking to Neko Zombie about reading a book, which at first is a weird detail. But Catherine is mumbling in her sleep about noises from the storeroom and Gregory being a dirty old man, so I think I see where this is going. My son is in the storeroom again, and he says some of the most disturbing stuff in this game. He calls the Randy Rat Uncle Gregory, and says he comes into the storeroom to read a weird book. Now, we know what kind of book Gregory reads, and we can see his scantily clad shrine from here. So does Gregory over the table and on the wall and hot candle wax on his I'm a naughty, naughty mouse, definitely sobbing and while a child watches? What in the Epstein's Island goes on in this place? Looking for more clues, and even Lost Doll is talking about Gregory's sausage boshing. It's clear then that we have to give the porn mag to the dusty pervert, so we do that again and he runs off to his wank shed. But we're no closer to getting Angel Dog's soul back, so it's back to spying on the guests. Unfortunately, spying on Devil Dog and Neko Zombie again yields no useful information, but walking in on them makes her transform back into Angel Dog and run away, which is a nice reference to the episode of the cartoon based around this character, especially considering that the game doesn't really give us an explanation for why she can change. Neko Zombie tells us everybody has something they're excited about, and when they do, they get careless, which is too specific a statement not to be a clue, so it looks like we're getting somewhere. Outside, Catherine sees us and gives chase, but we're close enough to our room to hide. And as we spy on her from inside, she mentions a soccer match is starting soon and ponders if Angel Dog is already there. There's only one TV in this hotel, so when the coast is clear, we head there and have a look. Gregory and Angel Dog are arguing about a scheduled clean, but before we can get more information, we're spotted by Mummy Dog and chased back to our room. Since Gregory is busy arguing with Angel Dog, we can reacquire the dirty magazine from the storeroom because we're about to need it. I'll go back to the TV room to watch the argument unfold, but thanks to angry guests and side quests, we arrive just in time for them to stop arguing and leave. When Catherine mentioned the football, it was just before 6 PM, so now we've got a whole day to waste before we can try again. Luckily, we have Clockmaster's stopwatch, so back in the room, we fast forward time and sleep until 5-ish. It's almost time for kickoff, and Gregory is talking to Hell Chef about stuff that would have been useful earlier. But we intercept him on his way to the TV room and give him back his magazine, so he runs off to his love lodge and leaves Angel Dog alone to watch the football. She gets so engrossed in the match, she drops her soul, and we take it with no issue. We get back to the room for a sleep and the final stamp of the night. But instead of starting another night, we're introduced to a new guest, Judgment Boy Gold. So it looks like the fourth night has 3 guests after all. Angel Dog tells Neko Zombie that the arrival of Judgment Boy Gold means it's time for the final judgment and ponders if we'll survive. And a sleeping Catherine lets slip that he's wandering around in the basement. On the way to claim the final soul, I almost get caught by Hell's Chef. Twice. But other than that, it's a straight shot to the Golden Boy. Acquiring this soul is super easy if you've been paying attention to the game. You're asked 5 questions about the residents of Gregory House and their routines, which explains why he had to appear as the final guest. If you answer them all correctly, he gives you the soul, but if you get one wrong, he knocks you out, and you wake up in your room 12 hours later and have to hunt him down and try again. The questions change each time you're quizzed, but from what I can see there aren't that many, and the same questions pop up quite frequently. So if you do get them wrong a couple of times, it won't be long until a question is repeated, which you know the answer to. On one hand, it's good that it's kept simple as it isn't going to stifle anyone's progress, but on the other, it would be cool if there was more variety to the questions, especially for repeat playthroughs. Not that it matters though, because we smashed the quiz on the first try and Judgment Boy gives us his soul. Now all we have to do is get back to the room to sleep and finally finish the 4th night. Dropping through the trash chute into the yard, we're seen by Angel Dog who begins to chase us. I turn left when I should have gone right and head to the stairs, which in turn causes Hell Chef to join the pursuit. I duck into the first unoccupied room I can find and try to hide in the cupboard, but I'm too slow and the nasty candle catches me. But he doesn't steal the soul we're carrying. So I guess guests can only steal souls off you on the nights that they themselves have souls to steal. And as much as it's a good thing for us now because we don't have to get the soul back from Hell Chef, I also feel the devs missed a trick with this. Having any resident being able to steal a soul you're carrying at any time would have hugely raised the stakes, and made the journey back to your room more tense, as one wrong move could see you having to re-steal the soul from an increasing number of aggressors. As it stands, we wake up from the horror show with a quarter of our mental gauge left, return to the room to deliver the soul, and death stamps our card for the 12th and final time. He tells us the real world is outside through the door in the lobby, but before we get out we have to release all the souls, triggering a cutscene of them escaping. At no surprise to anyone, I enjoyed the 4th night quite a lot. Clockmaster and my son as foils are mechanically great, and I love the way their soul collection makes use of the whole hotel. It takes some real planning to get right, and the item we get for checking Clockmaster when he breaks down is a huge help later on. It feels like one of the more developed ideas, especially when compared to Angel Dog, who is essentially just a repeat of Judgment Boy from night 1 by having to reuse the dirty magazine trick, which made it feel less like a throwback and more like they'd run out of ideas at this point. I also noticed something I've not been able to fit into the script naturally, but this is probably the last time I'll be able to do it and I really want to talk about it. So, our room number is 101. This is a reference to George Orwell's book 1984, in which Room 101 is a torture chamber that manifests a prisoner's worst fears. In the case of the book's protagonist, Winston Smith, that fear should sound familiar. He is afraid of being trapped and tortured by rats, unable to escape. And I know it's on the nose, but I think it's one of the game's more clever references. But the Room 101 that I'm familiar with was a comedy television series from the 90s where celebrities would discuss their pet hates and persuade the host to banish those hates into the room. Now, to be honest with you, I had no idea Room 101 was from 1984 until writing this part of the script, as I've never read it or seen any of the adaptations. I just watched a lot of comedy when I was a kid. But the rabbit hole goes even deeper. It turns out both the book and TV show are weirdly connected due to the fact that George Orwell named Room 101 after a meeting room in Broadcasting House where he would have to take long and boring meetings. What's Broadcasting House, I hear you ask? It's the headquarters of the BBC, the company who produced and broadcast the series Room 101.
It's like rain.
Anyway, night 5. The 5th night begins with a very angry mama interrogating Gregory about our soul collection. He tells her it's true and that we've already freed all of them, to which Gregory mama screams she's going to drink our soul. Waking up in our room, we can hear the background music has changed. Instead of the usual ambient spooky drone, it's now the jingle that plays when a soul is ready to be collected. Stranger still, checking the map reveals all the guests but Neko Zombie have left the hotel. Speaking to our feline friend, he tells us he didn't think we'd get this far, and thought we'd get tired of fighting and give up like everyone else, becoming a permanent resident of the hotel. He thanks us and tells us he's made his decision, although he doesn't tell us what he means by that, and he confirms what the Reaper said and tells us all we have to do to leave is go out the door in the lobby, and once we're through, to keep going and never look back. The tone and atmosphere throughout this section are fantastic. The music that's playing is associated with capturing a soul, so it radiates a sense of triumph. But the hotel being completely empty, and the solution being as easy as walk out the front door, really puts me on edge. Like, it can't be that simple, can it? And right on cue, that question is answered. The door is locked, and we're confronted by a maniacal Gregory mama who attacks us with a fireball, knocking us to the ground and damaging the door. Her gloating face, the last thing we see as we black out. Neko Zombie wakes us up and encourages us not to give up and keep heading for the exit. But when we finally come to, he's gone. This room has a couple of nice Easter eggs. The pop-up pirate-looking game on the bench is the zombie from Season 1 of the show, and the mask on the floor belongs to Umbaba from Season 2. Leaving the room brings us to an uncharted part of basement floor 1. Going up the stairs here takes us to the corridor we saw Gregory in earlier, and entering this door brings us to Gregory Mama's room, where we find an item called the Key of Hope. We find ourselves in another creepy corridor before finally coming to a locked door. We use the key and appear back in the basement we know so well, the triumphant soul-snatching music ringing through the air. But as we enter the reception area, a gate slams behind us and we're confronted by Gregory Mama once again.
Well, welcome back, dearie.
And in a complete change of tone and gameplay, we find ourselves in something of a boss battle. But luckily for us, Gregory Mama is a relatively easy encounter. She has a melee attack where she tries to hit you with her staff, a lightning teleport move she uses to dart around the arena, and when she's done either of these things 3 times, she'll throw a fireball. But we can't attack her back. Instead, we have to avoid her attacks and bait her into throwing a fireball at the door a few times. After it's taken a few hits, she goes berserk and starts attacking with a teleport fireball combo, but luckily this is her final attack that completely destroys the door on impact, allowing us to escape. But it's not over yet. Gregory has followed us, begging us to come back. But as soon as we turn and run away, his soul leaves his body and confronts us one last time. He asks if we've already forgotten the night we arrived, and proceeds to chase us to the exit, pleading with us to stay as huge chunks of our mental gauge are torn away as we get closer and closer to the light. And as we escape, his final words echo all around.
I'll keep your room ready for your return!
And with that, night 6, and the final cutscene begins. Death appears and tells us we did good, and, as promised, he'll send us back. But first we head back to the hotel and free Neko Zombie, wrapping his wound with our scarf. We see Gregory telling Mama he's going to catch us, but before he can do that, Neko Zombie enters the room and sets himself on fire, sending the hotel and residents up in flames. Making this another instance where reusing scenes from the cartoon makes no sense because the hotel was empty before the final showdown, but whatever. We see Savepoint Frog repeating the words she warned Gregory with earlier, and Neko Zombie leaves us with some haunting words.
This world is a reflection of the weakness in your heart. Whether you return to reality or not is up to you.
Finally, the remaining souls escape and the hotel burns to the ground. But as the credits roll and we reflect on our journey, we realise something.
The hotel was my own creation. A way to escape from reality. I had escaped from the hotel, but I couldn't forget my room. the gentle madness, the soft fear. It made me feel warm. To leave all that behind for the real world. Was to face a cold, empty future full of suffering. But if I ever become tired of my struggle with reality, I know I will find my way back to that hotel again. And when that time comes, I might never return to the real world.
And with that, the hotel rebuilds itself. Gregory regenerates, speaking the words, "It is time, let the show commence once again." The souls return to the hotel, and so begins another tale, as we're welcomed once again to Gregory House. I freaking love this ending. It is so dark, and after decades of dealing with my own mental illnesses, it hits so much harder than it did when I first played it. I have definitely hit points in my life where if I could escape reality, I would. Even if it was to a haunted hotel, because that would have been a hell of a lot easier than dealing with what I was dealing with at the time. And the thing that breaks my heart is I know I'm not alone in thinking like that. And I think that's why I love Gregory Horror Show as much as I do. There's a weird familiarity in the hopelessness that I find comforting. And that came across a lot heavier than I intended it to. The idea that we return to the hotel is reflected in the game itself, as finishing your first playthrough unlocks hard mode. Hard mode disables the guest icons on the maps, which makes a huge difference as it can no longer be used to see where guests are at any given time, so you actually have to pay attention to your surroundings. After the first night, death won't visit you when you sleep until you've collected all 3 souls, or 2 souls in the case of night 4, which makes things considerably more tense as you're in increased danger of having a soul taken back. The mental gauge goes down way faster than before, making item management absolutely essential as you burn through your stock trying to stay alive. And during the Gregory Mama boss fight, not only does it take more regular attacks before she throws a fireball, that fireball itself moves much faster, making it harder to avoid, and hits considerably harder. But weirdly, the speed of the spinner in the roulette game isn't increased, which surprised me, as I thought it'd be the same speed as the Basement 3 setting in the multiplayer game. Although, to be honest, I'm glad that it isn't, because it meant that I was able to cheese my way through this one as well. Hard mode is a lot of fun, but it's a shame you have to wait until you finish a normal playthrough to unlock it, as once you know how to acquire each soul, a huge part of the challenge disappears, and you miss out on a lot of what this game has to offer. For example, my normal playthrough took me over 5 hours to finish, but the hard mode run I did to capture this footage took me less than 2.5. I'd have loved to have played through it on that difficulty with no prior knowledge, but it is what it is. Gregory Horror Show is a fantastic little game. The simple cartoon-inspired visuals hold up way better than a lot of PS2 games do today, and to be honest, I'm surprised there hasn't been a budget HD release yet. The stripped-down survival horror gameplay is a lot of fun for fans of the genre, but also a great introduction for first-timers. I love the characters and their unique and quirky personalities. Except James, I still hate this guy. The music is as haunting as it is catchy, and I feel it should be held in as high a regard as Luigi's Mansion soundtrack. In fact, controversial opinion time, I think Gregory Horror Show is a better game than Luigi's Mansion in general. At least, I enjoy it a hell of a lot more. It's packed full of Easter eggs, some I've mentioned, some I haven't, and I know there are loads that I've missed entirely. Some guests even have horror shows that change if you're playing as a boy or a girl. For example, Cactus Gunman will give the girl a bunch of roses, but straight up shoot the boy. It's a shame that Gregory Horror Show didn't do as well as it deserved. From what I can see, there's no sales information about it, so it's safe to assume they weren't great. And despite generally reviewing well, it never received a US release, which is wild as it could have potentially done well over there. There are so many more strange and interesting characters seen throughout all 4 seasons of the show that a sequel could have worked really well, fixing a lot of the issues found within the first game. The one single item box and the repetitive gameplay by introducing new ways to find hints and new souls won through minigames, general stuff like that. But sadly we'll never know. In the years since the TV show and the game, there have been a couple of new releases in the Gregory Horror Show multimedia project, but nothing major. First, there was the manga Gregory Horror Show Another World by artist Sanami Suzuki, a story about a 22-year-old guy named Toru Takinozuka. He has no job, no dreams, and can't afford a place to stay until he comes across Gregory House, where his reality begins to unravel. I enjoyed this manga a lot more than I thought I would. At first, I began reading chapter 1 purely so I could mention it here, but as it went on, I kept wanting to read more and more, and ended up finishing all 11 chapters in one sitting. The story is a great fit for this universe, dealing with some pretty heavy themes, and the artwork is fantastic, and I recommend giving it a read if you want to experience a different take on these characters. Then, much later, in October 2018, Gregory Horror Show Lost Qualia was released. It's a mobile-only roguelike action RPG with a gacha card system. You explore a labyrinth and use melee weapons, throwable items, and ranged weapons to fight enemy mages and souls. And you use gacha cards to regain health, buff attacks, and perform horror shows. And as you probably guess, it's only available in Japan, and honestly, if it were out over here, I wouldn't bother with it, purely because it's a mobile gacha game. In 2016, series creator Naomi Iwata announced a new title called Gregory Horror Show Mystery Holiday on his official website. And thanks to the Wayback Machine, we can see character designs, and this description of the main protagonist, a young boy named Hiroshi, gives a brief synopsis of what the story was supposed to be. An elementary school student who strayed into Gregory House on a whim. He checked in because he heard his wishes could be granted. However, he uncovers Gregory's plan to destroy the world, and musters the courage to stand up to Gregory in order to stop his evil plan. Other than that and fan speculation, nothing else is known about the project, and other than the previously mentioned mobile game, that was it. The series stayed dormant until earlier this year. On the 5th of April, Naomi Iwata tweeted that he's starting a crowdfunding campaign for Gregory Horror Show on Kickstarter. He's creating a new game, Gregory Horror Show Soul of Roses, which is set to be a side-scrolling action roguelite, which is a huge departure from this game, but the idea of being stuck in a never-ending loop contextually and narratively tracks for this series. The game has already been successfully crowdfunded in Japan, but they don't have enough funding for localization, so have launched this additional campaign to produce an English version and bring more characters into it. There's also a short film they're trying to produce as a proof of concept to shop around to studios for a new show. And the funny thing is, I originally wanted to get this video out in December 2023 for the 20th anniversary of the game's UK release, but due to struggling with my mental health, which later turned into an ADHD diagnosis, I put the video on the shelf until I was feeling a little better. And the only reason I found out about that Kickstarter was because I was looking for cool facts to put in this video. So if the video had gone out in December like it was originally meant to, I'd have never known the Kickstarter existed.
John Cusack, Kate Beckinsale. Serendipity.
So yeah, I want to see this project succeed, and I'm going to leave a link to the Kickstarter in the description for anyone who wants to take a look. I know I only have a tiny platform, but it didn't feel right to talk about how much I love this series and not give this campaign a little signal boost. And I need to make it clear I haven't been asked by anyone to talk about this. I literally found out about it today while writing this part of the script, and I wanted to share it with as many people as possible. Anyway, that is it for this Gregory Horror Show retrospective. Have you played it? Let me know in the comments. If you're still watching after this long, thank you so much, you absolute legend, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video, whenever that may be.